Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the cargo hauler Meridian, watching the massive alien dreadnought glide past. The ship was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. Its hull gleamed with energy shields that humanity was forbidden to build. Weapons arrays lined its flanks, each cannon more powerful than anything Earth's fleet could legally mount. The vessel belonged to the Vexillar hierarchy, one of the dozen ancient species that ruled the galactic concordate. Sarah pressed her hand against the cold glass. 23 years had passed since the First Contact War. 23 years since Earth's proud fleet had been reduced to burning wreckage and desperate surrender. She had been young then, a freshly promoted lieutenant who watched her carrier explode around her. The aliens had been testing humanity, they said later, testing to see if these new arrivals could be trusted with the responsibilities of spacefaring civilization. Humanity had failed that test. "Commander, we're receiving another inspection notice," Lieutenant Ramos called from the bridge. His voice carried that familiar tone of resignation. They all knew what was coming. Sarah turned from the window and made her way back to the command center. The Meridian wasn't really a warship, though she commanded it like one. It was officially registered as a commercial transport, hauling mining equipment and supplies to the outer colonies. But Sarah had trained as a naval officer and old habits died hard. Her crew of 40 ran drills, maintained discipline, and kept the ship in perfect condition. It was all they could do to remember what they used to be. The inspection notice flashed on the main screen. Inspector Velcharan was coming aboard. Of course it was Velcharan. The tall, four-armed alien from the Thalzir species seemed to take personal pleasure in enforcing the Treaty of Titan. He had inspected the Meridian 6 times in the past year, always finding some minor violation to cite, always reminding them of their place in the galactic order. "Prepare for docking," Sarah ordered. "Full compliance protocols, I want everything by the book." The crew moved efficiently. They had done this dance many times before. Weapons lockers were sealed and logged. The ship's limited defensive systems were powered down. Navigation computers were opened for inspection. Every system was documented, measured, and compared against the strict limitations imposed by the treaty. Sarah had memorized those limitations long ago. No energy weapons above Class 3 output. No armor plating exceeding civilian commercial standards. No military-grade shields, no torpedo systems, no point defense networks. Humanity's ships were allowed to defend themselves against pirates and small threats, but nothing more. The Concordate would protect Earth's colonies from major dangers, they promised. Humanity just needed to trust their new overlords. The airlock cycled open. Inspector Velcharan entered with his usual entourage of scanning drones and security personnel. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his blue skin marked with the geometric patterns that indicated his rank. His forearms moved independently, one holding a datapad, another gesturing at his drones, the other two clasped behind his back in a posture that suggested both authority and disdain. "Commander Chen," he said in perfect English. The concordate species all had translation implants. "Another routine inspection. I trust you will cooperate fully." "We always do, Inspector," Sarah replied evenly. She had learned not to show emotion around Velcharan. He fed on human frustration. The inspection took 3 hours. Velcharan's drones scanned every system, measured every power output, analyzed every component. They checked the cargo holds, the engine specifications, the computer systems. They verified that the Meridian's single-point defense laser was properly limited, that its navigational deflectors didn't exceed civilian power levels, that its hull composition matched registered specifications. Sarah followed the inspection team, answering questions, providing documentation. She watched Velcharan's face for any sign of what he was thinking. The inspector paused at the cargo bay, studying the large containers of mining equipment destined for the New Britannia colony. "These mining lasers are quite powerful," Velcharan observed. "I trust they are not being diverted for military use." "They're for asteroid mining," Sarah said. "All properly licensed and documented. The colony needs them to expand their operations." Velcharan made a note on his datapad. "Of course. But you understand my caution, Commander. Your species has a history of creative reinterpretation of regulations. Sarah bit back her first response. Instead, she said, "We follow the treaty, Inspector." "We always have." "Yes, you follow the letter of the law," Velcheran agreed. His tone suggested this was somehow a failing. "But I wonder about the spirit. Do you resent these restrictions, Commander? Do you dream of building warships again?" It was a trap question. Sarah knew it immediately. Admitting resentment could be grounds for additional sanctions. But denying it completely would be an obvious lie, and Velcheran was skilled at detecting deception. "I dream of keeping my crew safe," Sarah said carefully. "The treaty allows us to do that within specific parameters. We stay within those parameters." Velcheran studied her for a long moment. His large, dark eyes seemed to look through her rather than at her. Finally, he gestured to his team. "The inspection is complete. Your vessel is in compliance, Commander Chen. This time." The words hung in the air like a threat. This time. As if next time they might find something, or invent something to find. Sarah maintained her composure until the inspection team had departed and the airlock sealed behind them. "All clear, Commander," Ramos reported from the bridge. Sarah allowed herself a moment of frustration, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. Then she returned to the command center and settled into her chair. "Resume course to New Britannia," she ordered. Standard speed. As the Meridian's engines engaged and the ship moved away from the inspection point, Sarah pulled up her private terminal. She had a message waiting, encrypted with a code she hadn't seen in years. Military encryption from the First Contact War. Her pulse quickened as she decrypted it. The message was simple. "Phoenix Initiative requires your expertise. Dr. Marcus Webb requests meeting at New Britannia Station. Urgent, confidential." Sarah read it 3 times. Phoenix Initiative. She had heard rumors, whispers in the veteran networks. Some kind of research project, people said. Some kind of contingency plan. But nobody spoke about it openly, and nobody asked too many questions. Marcus Webb's name brought back memories. He had been chief engineer on the carrier Valiant before the war ended, one of the best ship designers humanity had ever produced. After the treaty, he had disappeared into corporate research, supposedly working on improved cargo systems and mining technology. Sarah deleted the message and stared at the view screen. Ahead, stars stretched into infinity. Somewhere out there, beyond concorded space, threats lurked. The Carix hive fleets that had been detected at the galactic rim. Rogue AI collectives. Pirate confederations. And closer to home, the constant tension between concordate species, old grudges and territorial disputes that sometimes erupted into violence. The concordate promised to protect humanity. But Sarah had learned a hard lesson during the First Contact War. When the shooting started, the only people you could really trust were your own. The only ships that would truly fight for Earth were human ships. And right now, humanity had no real warships at all. She thought about Velcheran's question. Did she dream of building warships again? Every single night. The journey to New Britannia took another week. The colony was one of humanity's more successful outer settlements, home to nearly 2 million people. It orbited a resource-rich system that made it valuable for mining operations. The station itself was a massive construction, part shipyard, part commercial hub, part residential district. Sarah docked the Meridian at a commercial berth and arranged for the mining equipment to be offloaded. Then, wearing civilian clothes, she made her way through the station's crowded corridors to a nondescript office building in the industrial sector. The directory listed Web Engineering Consulting on the 42nd floor. Sarah took the elevator up, watching the numbers climb. Her hand instinctively went to her hip, where she would have carried a sidearm in the old days. Now she was unarmed. Unarmored. Just another civilian in a concordate-controlled galaxy. The office was small and unremarkable. A young receptionist looked up as Sarah entered. "Commander Chen, Dr. Webb is expecting you. Please go right in." The inner office was cluttered with holographic displays showing ship designs. Sarah recognized some of them as standard civilian vessels, cargo haulers and mining ships, but there was something different about them. Something she couldn't quite identify. The proportions were slightly off, the power systems seemed oversized, The structural support seemed unnecessarily robust. Marcus Webb stood from his desk. He had aged since the war, his hair now completely gray, but his eyes still held that sharp intelligence she remembered. He smiled and extended his hand. "Sarah Chen, it's been too long." They shook hands and Webb gestured to a chair. As soon as Sarah sat down, he activated a privacy field. The air around them shimmered slightly, blocking any surveillance or listening devices. "Thank you for coming," Webb said. "I know this is irregular, but what I'm about to show you needs to stay absolutely confidential." "The Phoenix Initiative," Sarah said. "I've heard rumors." "More than rumors now," Webb replied. He brought up a new holographic display. It showed what looked like a standard heavy cargo vessel. "Tell me what you see, Commander." Sarah studied the design. Class 7 cargo hauler, standard configuration. Looks like it's built for bulk transport, probably ore or manufactured goods. "Look closer. Look at the power systems." Sarah zoomed in on the engineering section. The fusion reactor was massive, far larger than necessary for a cargo ship. "That's oversized. Why would a cargo hauler need that much power?" "Now look at the structural frame." The hull composition was unusual, reinforced at stress points that wouldn't normally need reinforcement on a civilian vessel. The cargo holds had bulkheads that seemed unnecessarily strong, and the docking ports were configured in a way that suggested modular attachment points. Understanding began to dawn. Sarah looked at Webb with wide eyes. "You're building warships," she breathed. "No," Webb said with a slight smile. "We're building cargo haulers and mining ships and research vessels, all perfectly legal under the Treaty of Titan. But we're building them with certain specifications. Oversized reactors for future expansion, reinforced hulls for hazardous environment operations, modular cargo systems for flexible mission profiles." He brought up another display, showing a mining ship with what looked like industrial cutting lasers. "These are asteroid mining tools. Class 4 industrial lasers, perfectly legal. But with a minor modification to the focusing array, they could also serve as point defense weapons. Purely theoretical, of course." Another display, a research vessel with large sensor arrays, scientific equipment for studying stellar phenomena. But those same sensors could map enemy fleet positions and relay tactical data. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. "You're building components, pieces that look civilian but can be assembled into military systems. We prefer to think of it as multi-purpose engineering," Webb said. "Everything we're doing is technically legal. We're not building warships. We're building civilian vessels that happen to be very robust and very adaptable. If, hypothetically, there was ever an emergency that required these vessels to take on defensive roles, they could be reconfigured quickly." "The Concordat will never allow this," Sarah said. "If they figure out what you're doing, they won't figure it out unless someone tells them," Webb interrupted. "And even if they get suspicious, what can they prove? We're following the treaty to the letter. No military vessels, no prohibited weapon systems, just well-engineered civilian ships." Sarah sat back, her mind working through the possibilities. It was brilliant and terrifying at the same time. A shadow fleet hiding in plain sight, hundreds or thousands of ships that looked harmless but could transform into warships if needed.
"Why are you telling me this?"
she asked. Webb's expression grew serious. "Because having the ships is only half the battle, Commander. We need people who know how to use them. Tacticians, strategists, veterans who understand naval warfare. The Phoenix Initiative isn't just about building ships. It's about building a fleet, and a fleet needs commanders." Sarah thought about the Meridian, her glorified cargo hauler. She thought about Velcheran and his inspections, the constant reminder of humanity's subordinate position. She thought about the promises of protection that rang hollow when she considered the vast distances of space and the many threats that lurked in the darkness. "This could start another war," she said quietly. "If the Concordat thinks we're violating the treaty was meant to keep us helpless," Webb said. "To make sure humanity never threatens the established order. But what happens when something threatens us? What happens when the Concordat can't or won't protect our colonies? Do we just accept whatever fate comes?" Sarah knew the answer. She had always known the answer. Humanity had to be able to defend itself, treaty or no treaty. The question was whether they could do it without triggering a galactic war. "I need to think about this," she said finally. Webb nodded. "Take your time. But not too much time, Commander. The galaxy is more dangerous than the Concordat wants us to believe." Storm clouds are gathering, and when they break, humanity needs to be ready. Sarah left the office with her mind spinning. She walked through the station, seeing everything differently now. That cargo ship docking at berth 7, was it part of Phoenix? That mining vessel being refitted in the shipyard, was it being prepared for secret military capability? How many ships were already out there hiding in plain sight? How many civilians were actually part of this vast conspiracy? And most importantly, was this humanity's salvation or its doom? Back on the Meridian, Sarah stood at the observation deck again. Another Concordat dreadnought passed by, its weapons gleaming, its power undeniable. For 23 years, humanity had lived under the protection and control of these ancient species. For 23 years, they had been told what they could and couldn't build, where they could and couldn't go, how they could and couldn't defend themselves. The treaty had kept the peace, but it had also kept humanity weak. Sarah made her decision. She pulled out her communicator and sent an encrypted message to Webb. Just 3 words: I'm in. Whatever came next, humanity wouldn't face it unarmed. They had said it couldn't be done. They had forbidden warships, banned military vessels, restricted every system that could make humanity dangerous, but they had underestimated human ingenuity. They had forgotten that necessity was the mother of invention, and they had never understood that humanity's greatest strength wasn't weapons or shields or armor. It was the refusal to accept defeat. The Phoenix was rising from the ashes, and the galaxy would never see it coming. 6 months after her meeting with Dr. Webb, Commander Sarah Chen found herself in a very different kind of briefing room. It was located deep inside an asteroid mining facility in the belt, hidden behind layers of security and misdirection. Around the table sat 15 people, representatives from various human governments, corporations, and military organizations. They were the core leadership of the Phoenix Initiative. Dr. Marcus Webb stood at the head of the table, manipulating a holographic display that showed dozens of ship designs. We now have 47 vessels fully converted and operational, he announced. Another 120 in various stages of preparation. The beauty of our approach is that every ship remains functionally civilian until the moment we need it to be something else. Admiral Jennifer Okoye, one of the few remaining flag officers from Earth's old Navy, leaned forward. She was in her 70s now, but still sharp. What about the Concordat? Any increased scrutiny? Inspector Velsharan has been more aggressive with his inspections, Sarah reported. But he hasn't found anything actionable. We're very careful to stay within treaty parameters until the actual conversion happens. And how long does conversion take? Asked Minister David Park, representing the United Earth government. Webb brought up a simulation. For a basic cargo hauler to combat configuration, we're looking at 6 hours with a trained crew. Mining vessels can convert faster because their equipment already resembles weapons. Research ships take longer, maybe 10 hours, because their systems are more complex. 6 hours is an eternity in combat, Admiral Okoye observed. Which is why we're working on reducing that time, Webb replied. The newer designs have quick-release panels and pre-positioned hardware. We're getting some vessels down to 3 hours, but there's a trade-off. The faster the conversion, the more obvious the preparation becomes. We have to balance capability with deniability. Sarah understood the problem intimately. She had spent the last 6 months training crews in secret, teaching cargo hauler captains how to think like warship commanders, running simulations in isolated systems where Concordat observers wouldn't notice. It was exhausting work, made more difficult by the need for absolute secrecy. The meeting continued for hours, discussing logistics, recruitment, training protocols, and risk management. The Phoenix Initiative had grown far beyond what Sarah had imagined. It wasn't just a few ships anymore. It was a comprehensive program involving thousands of people across dozens of colonies and installations. But with that growth came danger. The more people who knew about Phoenix, the greater the chance of exposure. And exposure could mean disaster. The Concordat had made clear what would happen if humanity violated the Treaty of Titan. Economic sanctions at minimum. Military intervention at worst. Some of the more hardline species were already advocating for tighter restrictions on human activity. After the meeting, Admiral Okoye pulled Sarah aside. The older woman's face was grave. "Walk with me, Commander." They moved through the facility's corridors, passing workers who were busy with normal mining operations, unaware of the secret meetings happening in the secured sections. Okoye remained silent until they reached an observation lounge overlooking the asteroid field. I fought in the First Contact War, Okoye said quietly. I was captain of the destroyer Reliant when the Concordat fleet appeared. We didn't know what we were facing. We made assumptions based on our own limited experience, and we paid for those assumptions with thousands of lives. Sarah waited. She had heard stories about the Reliant. It had been one of the last ships to surrender, fighting well past the point of reason. The treaty was necessary, Okoye continued. Humanity wasn't ready for galactic politics. We were children playing with guns we didn't understand. The Concordat could have exterminated us. Instead, they gave us a chance to learn, to grow, to prove ourselves worthy of joining their civilization. But, Sarah prompted. But 23 years is a long time to be treated like children, Okoye said. And the galaxy hasn't become safer while we've been disarmed. The Concordat is showing cracks. Species that used to cooperate are now competing. Border disputes are escalating. And there are threats out there that the Concordat either can't or won't acknowledge. She turned to face Sarah directly. The Phoenix Initiative is necessary, but it's also dangerous. If we're discovered before we're ready, it could destroy everything humanity has built. So I need to know, Commander, are you committed to this? Not just intellectually, but in your gut. Because if this goes wrong, you'll be remembered as the person who started the Second War with the Concordat. Sarah met the Admiral's gaze. I'm committed. Humanity deserves the right to defend itself. And if that means bending some rules, then that's what we do. Okoye nodded slowly. Good. Because I'm putting you in charge of tactical operations. Webb handles the engineering. I handle the politics. You'll handle the fighting, if fighting becomes necessary. The responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders like a physical weight. She had commanded a cargo hauler for years, running drills and maintaining skills that seemed pointless. Now those skills might determine humanity's survival. Over the following months, Sarah threw herself into the work. She traveled constantly, moving between human colonies and installations under various civilian covers. Here she trained a crew of mining ship operators in combat maneuvers. There she reviewed defensive positions for a research station. Everywhere she went, she found people eager to contribute to Phoenix, but she also found opposition. Not everyone agreed with the initiative's goals. Some believed humanity should honor the treaty completely, trusting the Concordat to provide protection. Others feared the consequences of discovery. A vocal minority argued that Phoenix was militaristic thinking, a return to the aggressive posture that had nearly destroyed humanity during First Contact. Sarah met with one such opponent at New Britannia Station. Professor Amelia Hart was a historian and peace activist who had written extensively about the First Contact War. She had requested the meeting after hearing rumors about Phoenix, though she didn't know the full scope. Commander Chen, Hart said as they sat in a quiet cafe, I respect your service, but I'm concerned about what I'm hearing. Whispers of military preparation, secret projects. This sounds like the kind of thinking that started the war in the first place. We're not preparing for war, Sarah said carefully. We're preparing for the possibility of needing to defend ourselves. That's what we said last time, Hart replied. We were preparing for defense. We were building strong fleets to protect Earth. And then we encountered the Concordat, and our defensive posture looked like aggression to them. We provoked a conflict because we couldn't imagine a scenario where we weren't the strongest force in the room. Sarah sipped her coffee, considering her response. The situation is different now. We're not building fleets to project power. We're building capabilities within the constraints of the treaty. If we never need them, then no harm done. But if a crisis comes and we're helpless, how many people will die because we chose to remain weak? Weakness isn't the same as peace, Hart said. And strength isn't the same as security. The Concordat has kept the peace for thousands of years. Their system works. Maybe humanity needs to learn to work within that system instead of trying to subvert it. Their system works for them, Sarah countered. But does it work for us? When our colonies need protection, will the Concordat respond fast enough? Will they consider human lives as important as their own? Hart had no immediate answer to that. The uncomfortable truth was that humanity occupied a lower tier in Concordat society. They had fewer rights, less representation, and little ability to influence decisions that affected their survival. The protection they received was real, but it came with the price of subordination. I'm not asking you to agree with everything we're doing, Sarah said. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that we might need options. That blind trust in the Concordat might not be enough. The professor left without committing to support or opposition, but Sarah noticed that the critical articles Hart had been writing about military preparation stopped appearing. Sometimes winning an argument meant simply planting a seed of doubt. The breakthrough in conversion technology came from an unexpected source. A young engineer named Kenji Tanaka, working at a civilian shipyard, had developed a new type of modular power coupling. On the surface, it was designed for rapid maintenance and repair of civilian vessels. But the military applications were obvious. With Tanaka's couplings, a ship's reactor could be disconnected and upgraded in minutes instead of hours. Weapon systems could be swapped in and out like changing batteries. Shield generators could be mounted externally and activated without extensive integration with the ship's main systems. Webb immediately saw the potential. "This changes everything," he said, examining Tanaka's designs. "With this technology, we can reduce conversion time to under an hour for most vessels. Maybe 30 minutes for the newer builds, 30 minutes. That was a realistic time frame for emergency response. If a threat appeared, human vessels could transform from civilian craft to warships faster than most species could launch a single attack run." The new couplings were quickly integrated into Phoenix Initiative designs. Older vessels were retrofitted during routine maintenance cycles. Each upgrade made the Shadow fleet more capable, more ready for whatever crisis might come. But the crisis, when it came, wasn't what anyone expected. Sarah was aboard the Meridian, running a supply mission to the frontier colony of New Perth when the first reports arrived. Long-range sensors at the galactic rim had detected something massive, something that didn't match any known Concordat signature. Ships, hundreds of them moving in coordinated swarms. The Kariks had arrived. Sarah had read the intelligence briefings about the Kariks. Everyone in the Concordat military networks had. They were a hive species from beyond the galactic rim. Organic ships controlled by distributed intelligence. They had been probing Concordat space for years, testing defenses, studying responses. The Concordat had fought them off in minor skirmishes, but never faced a full-scale invasion. Until now. The initial reports were fragmentary. Carrick's bioships pouring through a weak point in Concordat border defenses, automated warning stations going offline, scout vessels disappearing, and then silence from 3 entire frontier sectors. Sarah's communicator lit up with encrypted Phoenix Initiative channels. Emergency protocols activating. All operatives to report status and stand by for orders. "Ramos," Sarah called to her second officer. "Get me a direct link to New Britannia Command. And start running pre-conversion checks on all our modified systems quietly." "Ma'am, are we going active?" "Not yet. But I want us ready in case we need to." Over the next hours, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Concordat fleets were mobilizing, moving toward the affected sectors. But the Kariks' advance was faster than expected. They weren't following conventional tactics. The bioships moved in massive swarms, overwhelming defenders through sheer numbers rather than superior firepower. And they were heading toward human space. New Perth was a frontier colony, home to 300,000 people. It had limited defenses relying on Concordat protection. But the nearest Concordat fleet was days away. The Karik swarm would arrive in 36 hours. Sarah received an encrypted message from Admiral Okoye. The message was brief. "Phoenix Authorization Alpha. All units execute defensive protocol. Protect human colonies at all costs. Good luck." This was it. The moment they had prepared for. The reason Phoenix existed? Sarah stood at the command center of the Meridian, looking at her crew. They were good people, trained professionals who had served faithfully for years. They deserved to know what was about to happen. "Listen up," she announced. "You all know we've been running unusual drills, installing equipment that seemed excessive for a cargo hauler. You probably wondered why we were training for scenarios that didn't make sense for our official mission." She paused, letting them absorb this. "The Meridian isn't just a cargo hauler. It never was. We're part of something called the Phoenix Initiative. This ship can be converted into a combat vessel in under an hour, and right now there's an alien swarm heading for New Perth. The Concordat can't get here in time, so we're going to defend this colony ourselves." Silence filled the bridge. Then Ramos spoke up. "What are your orders, Commander?" Sarah smiled. That was exactly the response she had hoped for. "Begin conversion. I want all weapon systems online, shields at full power, and every combat protocol activated. We're going to war." The Meridian transformed before her eyes. Cargo bay panels slid open, revealing hidden weapon mounts. The oversized reactor, previously running at minimal capacity, surged to full power. Shield generators extended from concealed housings. The industrial mining lasers reconfigured their focusing arrays, becoming point defense weapons. External armor plates deployed, covering vulnerable sections. In 42 minutes, the Meridian went from civilian cargo hauler to a functional warship. And across human space, hundreds of other vessels were doing the same thing. Mining ships became patrol corvettes. Research vessels became sensor platforms and command ships. Heavy cargo haulers became assault carriers. The Shadow Fleet was becoming real. Sarah sent a transmission to New Perth authorities. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Human Space Vessel Meridian. We are inbound to provide defensive support against the Carix incursion. Recommend immediate evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel and preparation of all defensive installations. The response was confused at first. UHSV Meridian? Humanity didn't have vessels with that designation. But as they tracked the ship's approach and saw its combat configuration, understanding dawned. The secret was out. Humanity had warships. The question now was whether those warships would be enough to survive what was coming. Sarah strapped into her command chair and pulled up the tactical display. The Carix swarm was still 30 hours out. Other Phoenix vessels were converging on New Perth from surrounding systems. They would have maybe 20 ships to defend against a force that outnumbered them 50-1. All hands battle stations, Sarah ordered. Prepare for combat operations. And someone send a message to that Concordat inspector. Tell Velcheron we're sorry we couldn't wait for his approval. We had a colony to defend. The Meridian's engines burned bright as it accelerated toward New Perth. Behind it, the Shadow Fleet emerged from hiding. The ships that weren't supposed to exist. The warships that humanity had been forbidden to build. They had said it couldn't be done. They had written it into law, backed by the full might of the Concordat. They were about to learn how little those words meant when human lives hung in the balance. The Carix bioships appeared on the edge of the New Perth system like a swarm of insects, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Commander Sarah Chen watched them through the Meridian's sensors, her tactical display showing hundreds of contacts spreading across space in a formation that seemed chaotic, but was actually precisely coordinated. Count? She asked Lieutenant Ramos. 473 individual contacts, Commander, mass ranging from corvette to cruiser equivalent. They're not using standard approach vectors. The swarm is flowing, like water finding cracks. Sarah had studied the limited intelligence available on Carix tactics. The hive ships didn't think like individual vessels. They moved as one organism, each ship a cell in a larger body. Conventional fleet formations meant nothing to them. They found weaknesses and exploited them with terrifying efficiency. Status of Phoenix forces? 18 vessels have completed conversion and are in defensive positions around New Perth. 5 more are en route, ETA 3 to 7 hours. The Concordat has acknowledged our transmissions but hasn't authorized our actions. That was putting it mildly. The Concordat had sent multiple demands for the human ships to stand down immediately, return to civilian configuration, and await proper military response. Admiral Okoye had politely ignored those demands. 300,000 people on New Perth couldn't wait for Concordat bureaucracy. The Phoenix fleet had arranged itself in a modified shield wall formation, something Sarah had adapted from ancient Earth naval tactics. Heavier converted cargo haulers formed the center line, their improvised armor and shield generators creating a defensive barrier. Lighter mining vessels, faster and more maneuverable, formed the wings. Research vessels hung back, their sensor arrays mapping the entire battle space and coordinating targeting data. It wasn't a proper battle fleet. The ships had been civilian vessels just hours ago. The crews were cargo haulers and miners, not trained naval personnel. But they were human, and they were determined to protect their own. Incoming transmission from New Perth Governor, Ramos reported. Sarah accepted the connection. Governor Michael Torres appeared on her screen, his face showing the strain of the last few hours. Commander Chen, I've ordered the evacuation of non-essential personnel to underground shelters. But we have over 300,000 people here. Even with every shuttle and transport working constantly, we can't evacuate more than a fraction of them before the Carix arrive. We're not planning to evacuate, Governor. We're planning to hold. Torres stared at her. With 18 ships? Commander, the Carix swarm has nearly 500 vessels. This is suicide. Probably, Sarah admitted. But it's the only option we have. The Concordate fleet won't arrive for another 48 hours. If we run, New Perth falls. So we fight. Then God help us all. The transmission ended. Sarah stood and addressed her bridge crew. Listen up. I won't lie to you. We're massively outnumbered. The Kariks are experienced fighters, and we're flying converted cargo haulers. By all conventional military analysis, we should lose this engagement badly. She paused, meeting each person's eyes. But conventional military analysis doesn't account for human stubbornness. It doesn't factor in the fact that we're protecting our people, our colony, our future. The Kariks are a hive mind fighting because that's what they do. We're individuals choosing to stand together because it's the right thing to do. That has to count for something. Ramos spoke up. What's the tactical plan, Commander? Sarah brought up the battle map. The Kariks excel at overwhelming single targets through concentration of force, so we don't give them single targets. We stay mobile, use our converted mining lasers for point defense, and make them split their attention. The research vessels will coordinate our movements and identify priority targets. We can't win a straight fight, but we can make them pay for every meter of space they take. Another officer raised his hand. Commander, permission to speak freely? Granted, we're all scared. But we're ready. Let's show these aliens what humans can do. A chorus of agreement rang out across the bridge. Sarah felt a surge of pride. These weren't professional soldiers. They were ordinary people who had chosen to become extraordinary when circumstances demanded it. Weapons free in 10 minutes, Sarah ordered. All ships confirm battle readiness. The Phoenix fleet reported in one by one. Converted cargo haulers with names like Prosperity and New Dawn, now bristling with improvised weapons. Mining ships like Rockbreaker and Orehound, their industrial lasers reconfigured for combat. Research vessels like Scientific Endeavor and Discovery, their sensors now serving as the fleet's eyes and ears. The Karik swarm reached weapons range. The bioships opened fire with organic projectile weapons, launching living missiles that tracked their targets with disturbing intelligence. The first wave splashed against the Phoenix fleet's shields, testing their strength. Return fire, Sarah commanded. Target their lead elements. Make them think twice about advancing. The Meridian's converted mining lasers spat coherent light across the void. Other ships joined in, creating a web of fire that intersected with the Karik's formation. Several bioships exploded, their organic hulls unable to withstand the concentrated energy. But for every ship destroyed, 2 more moved forward to take its place. The battle quickly became chaotic. The Kariks didn't fight in neat formations or follow predictable patterns. They swarmed like angry hornets coming from multiple vectors simultaneously. The Phoenix ships had to constantly reorient, spreading their defensive fire across multiple threats. Contact on our starboard flank, Ramos shouted. 20 Kariks vessels breaking through. Sarah spun her command chair. Wing formation, engage and repel. Don't let them envelope us. 3 converted mining ships broke from the main line, their superior maneuverability allowing them to intercept the flanking force. Their weapons, designed to cut through asteroids, tore into Karik's bioships with devastating effect. But the hive vessels fought back, launching waves of organic missiles that tracked the human ships relentlessly. One of the mining vessels, the Frontier Spirit, took multiple hits. Its improvised shields collapsed and missiles struck the hull directly. Sarah watched on her tactical display as the ship's icon flickered and went red. Frontier Spirit is venting atmosphere, the communications officer reported. They're trying to seal the breaches, but... Commander, they're not going to make it. Order them to abandon ship, Sarah said, her voice tight. Get their crew to the escape pods. But the Frontier Spirit's captain had other ideas. His voice came across the fleet channel, distorted by static. Negative on evacuation, Commander. We still have power and weapons. If we're going down, we're taking some of these bastards with us. The mining vessel, its hull breached and leaking air, turned directly into the Karik's formation. It fired every weapon it had, burning through power reserves with reckless abandon. Then, as the bioships closed in for the kill, the Frontier Spirit detonated its reactor core. The explosion took out 12 Karik's vessels and scattered the rest of the flanking force. It also took the lives of 17 human crew members who had chosen to die protecting their colony. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, honoring their sacrifice. Then she opened them and returned to the battle. There would be time for grief later if any of them survived. The fight raged for 6 hours. The Phoenix fleet gave ground slowly, falling back toward New Perth's orbital space. They traded hull integrity and crew lives for time and enemy casualties. The Carracks paid heavily for every advance, but they kept coming. Sarah's tactical display showed the situation deteriorating. 3 Phoenix ships destroyed, 4 more severely damaged, and ammunition reserves running low. The converted cargo haulers weren't designed for sustained combat. Their improvised weapons were overheating, their shields were failing, and their crews were exhausted. The Carracks had lost nearly 100 ships, but they still outnumbered the defenders 5-1. And they showed no signs of stopping. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission," Ramos said. It's Inspector Velcheran." Sarah's eyebrows rose. The concordate inspector who had made her life difficult for years was calling now. She accepted the transmission. Velcheran's 4-armed form appeared on screen. He was aboard a concordate scout ship that had apparently been observing the battle from a safe distance. His face was hard to read, but his voice carried something Sarah had never heard from him. The tribunal chamber on Concordate Prime was designed to intimidate. The ceiling stretched upward into darkness, making the space feel infinite and oppressive. Rings of seating surrounded a central platform where the accused would stand. Representatives from 47 different species sat in judgment, their various forms creating a gallery of alien architecture. Commander Sarah Chen stood on that platform, alone. Admiral Okoye and Dr. Webb were somewhere in the audience, but regulations prohibited them from standing with her. This was her responsibility to bear. The charges were extensive. Violation of the Treaty of Titan, unauthorized construction of military vessels, deployment of prohibited weapon systems, deception of concordate inspectors. The list went on for several minutes, read aloud by a functionary whose mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. When the charges finished, the High Arbiter spoke. She was a member of the ancient Talzir species, her crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. "Commander Sarah Chen of Earth, you have heard the accusations against you and your species. How do you respond?" Sarah had spent weeks preparing for this moment. She had consulted with lawyers, studied concordate legal procedures, and rehearsed her defense countless times. But now, standing in this massive chamber with the weight of humanity's future on her shoulders, all those prepared words seemed inadequate. She decided to speak from the heart instead. "We are guilty," Sarah said simply. "We built warships when we were forbidden to do so. We modified civilian vessels into military craft. We deceived inspectors and bent the rules of the treaty until they nearly broke. All of this is true, and I won't insult this tribunal by denying it." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Apparently admitting guilt immediately wasn't the typical approach. "But I want to explain why we did it," Sarah continued. 23 years ago, humanity was defeated in the First Contact War. We were too aggressive, too confident, too ignorant of our place in the galactic order. The treaty that followed was meant to teach us humility and prevent us from becoming a threat. And it succeeded. We learned our lesson. We accepted our limitations. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But we also learned something else. We learned that treaties and laws and promises of protection are only as good as the willingness to enforce them. When the Carracks came to New Perth, where was the Concordate fleet? It was 2 days away. Too far to help. Too slow to save 300,000 human lives. The High Arbiter's crystalline form shifted. The Concordate maintains defensive forces throughout known space. No system can be perfectly protected. Delays are inevitable. "I understand that," Sarah replied. "But those delays are measured in hours for core Concordate worlds and days for human colonies. The message is clear. Human lives are less valuable than alien lives. Human security is less important than maintaining the political structure that keeps us subordinate." "That is not the intention of the treaty," a representative from the Vexlar hierarchy interjected. He was tall and imposing, his forearms gesturing emphatically. "The restrictions exist to prevent another war, to protect all species, including yours. To protect you from us," Sarah corrected. "The treaty assumes humanity is the threat. But what happened at New Perth proves otherwise. We didn't attack anyone. We didn't start a war. We defended our people against an external threat using the only resources we had available. Is that really a crime worthy of this tribunal?" Another representative spoke up. This one from a species Sarah didn't recognize. "You violated the explicit terms of the treaty. You built warships in secret. You lied to inspectors. You undermined the trust that the Concordate extended to your species." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "We followed the letter of the law while violating its spirit. We found loopholes and exploited them. We built cargo haulers with oversized reactors, mining ships with powerful cutting lasers, research vessels with advanced sensors. Every component was technically legal. It was only when we assembled those components into combat configurations that we crossed the line. She took a deep breath. But here's my question for this tribunal. If following the treaty meant letting 300,000 people die, what were we supposed to do? Watch from orbit while the Kariks overran our colony? Send polite requests for help while people were being killed? Or do what any species would do when their survival was threatened and fight back with everything we had? The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives argued among themselves, their voices creating a cacophony of different languages and perspectives. The High Arbiter called for order, her crystalline voice cutting through the noise. Commander Chen raises a difficult question, the Arbiter said. The balance between security and freedom is delicate. The treaty was designed to maintain that balance. But circumstances change. Threats evolve. Perhaps the tribunal should hear from others who witnessed these events. Over the next hours, a parade of witnesses testified. Concordant officers who had observed the Battle of New Perth described the human fleet's performance. Military analysts assessed the tactical decisions. Survivors from the colony spoke about watching the battle from below, knowing their lives depended on converted cargo haulers holding off a massive swarm. Then Inspector Vel Sharan took the platform. Sarah was surprised to see him. She expected the inspector to be her harshest critic, the one demanding maximum punishment for her deceptions. Instead, Vel Sharan spoke carefully. I have conducted dozens of inspections of human vessels over the past years. I always suspected that something was amiss. The ships were too robust, too well designed for their stated purposes. But I could never prove a violation because there was no violation to prove. Every component, every system, every modification was technically legal under the treaty. He turned to address Sarah directly. I resented the humans for their cleverness. I believed they were dishonoring the spirit of the peace we had established. But at New Perth I watched them fight. I saw crews who were cargo haulers and miners transform into warriors. I witnessed ships that had no right to stand against military vessels hold the line for 6 hours against overwhelming odds. Vel Sharan's forearms spread wide. They lost 43 people defending a colony, 43 individuals who chose to die protecting others, and they destroyed over 100 Kariks vessels in the process. This tribunal can debate legalities and treaties, but the simple truth is this. The humans saved lives that we could not save. They did what we were unable to do. And they did it with converted civilian vessels because we forbade them from building anything better. The chamber fell silent. Coming from someone who had been enforcing the treaty so strictly, Vel Sharan's words carried enormous weight. The High Arbiter spoke again. This tribunal will now hear from military command. Admiral Korath, please present your assessment. The Vexlar Admiral stepped to a secondary platform. His presence was commanding, his uniform decorated with honors from countless campaigns. From a purely military perspective, the human performance at New Perth was remarkable. They demonstrated tactical flexibility, crew discipline, and willingness to accept casualties that many concordant species would find difficult to match. He brought up holographic displays showing the battle from various angles. Their use of converted civilian vessels was ingenious. The Kariks had no classification system for these ships. Are they warships? Are they civilian craft? This confusion degraded the Hive's targeting priorities and gave the humans an advantage despite their inferior firepower. Admiral Korath paused, his expression thoughtful. But I must also address the larger implications. If we allow humanity to maintain these converted vessels, what message does that send to other species? The treaty system depends on trust and compliance. If humans can circumvent restrictions through clever engineering, other species will attempt similar approaches. The entire framework of concordant military law could unravel. So you recommend punishment? The High Arbiter asked. I recommend reality, Korath replied. The humans built a shadow fleet because they did not trust us to protect them, and at New Perth their lack of trust was justified. We were not there when they needed us, so they provided their own protection. This is not a legal problem, High Arbiter. This is a political problem. The question is not whether humans violated the treaty, but whether the treaty itself is still serving its intended purpose. The tribunal debated for another hour. Representatives argued from different perspectives. Some wanted harsh sanctions against humanity. Others supported modifying the treaty to acknowledge the changed circumstances. A few even suggested that the restrictions had been too severe from the beginning. Finally, the High Arbiter called for a vote on 3 propositions. First, whether humanity had violated the Treaty of Titan. The vote was unanimous. Yes, they had violated it. Second, whether those violations warranted punishment. This vote was split, with slightly over half voting yes. Third, whether the Treaty of Titan should be modified or replaced. This vote was also split, but in the opposite direction. A narrow majority supported revisiting the treaty terms. The High Arbiter's crystalline form pulsed with light as she considered the results. This tribunal finds Commander Sarah Chen and the human species guilty of treaty violations. However, we also acknowledge the extraordinary circumstances that motivated those violations. The sentence will be suspended pending comprehensive review of the treaty framework. She turned to address the full chamber. The Concordat was founded on principles of mutual defense and cooperation. The Treaty of Titan was meant to protect those principles. But if the treaty prevents member species from defending themselves when the Concordat cannot respond quickly enough, then the treaty itself becomes a threat to our shared security. The Arbiter's voice grew stronger. Therefore, I am establishing a commission to review and revise the military restrictions placed on humanity. This commission will consider humanity's demonstrated capabilities, their tactical performance, and their commitment to defensive rather than aggressive operations. Within 6 months, we will have a new framework that balances security concerns with practical reality. Sarah felt relief wash over her. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was far better than she had dared hope. The treaty would be revised. Humanity would gain recognition for their capabilities. The Shadow Fleet might become legitimate, but the Arbiter wasn't finished. Commander Chen, you will remain under Concordat supervision during this review period. Your vessels will be monitored. Any further unauthorized modifications will result in immediate sanctions. Do you understand? Yes, High Arbiter, Sarah replied. Then this tribunal is adjourned. The chamber emptied slowly. Sarah stood on the platform, processing everything that had happened. Admiral Okoye and Dr. Webb made their way down to join her. Well, Webb said with a slight smile, that could have gone worse. Could have gone better too, Okoye replied. We're still on probation. Any mistake and they'll bring the hammer down hard. Sarah nodded. But we bought time. 6 months to prove we can be trusted. 6 months to show that humans with proper warships aren't a threat to anyone except our enemies. They left the tribunal chamber and stepped outside into the streets of Concordat Prime. The city was a marvel of architecture. Dozens of species living and working together. In the distance, ships launched from orbital platforms heading to every corner of known space. What's our next move? Webb asked. Sarah considered the question. We keep doing what we've been doing. Training crews. Refining our designs. Preparing for the next crisis. Because there will be a next crisis. The Kariks aren't gone, just scattered. And there are other threats out there. And when the commission asks about our activities, Okoye pressed. We tell them the truth, Sarah said. We're building a fleet capable of defending human space. Not to threaten the Concordat, but to supplement it. To be partners rather than dependents. If they can accept that, then we have a future together. If they can't, she trailed off, not wanting to complete that thought. The 3 of them walked through the alien city. 3 humans among thousands of species. They were representatives of a young civilization that had been knocked down, restricted, and told what they couldn't do. But they had risen anyway, found loopholes, and proved their worth in battle. The vote had been close. The sentiment was mixed. Not every species in the Concordat was ready to trust humanity with military power. There were still those who believed the restrictions should remain in place, that humans were too dangerous, too aggressive, too unpredictable. Sarah understood their concerns. Human history was full of wars and conflicts, but it was also full of cooperation and sacrifice. The 43 people who died at New Perth proved that humans could be trusted to do the right thing when it mattered most. 6 months. That's how long they had to convince the Concordat that humanity deserved to stand as equals rather than subjects. 6 months to demonstrate that the phoenix rising from the ashes was a symbol of renewal, not revenge. It wouldn't be easy. There would be opposition, setbacks, and challenges. Some species would never accept human warships. Others would demand additional restrictions and oversight. But Sarah had learned something important over the years. Humans were at their best when facing impossible odds. They thrived on challenges that would break other species. They found ways to succeed when every logical analysis said they should fail. The tribunal had tried to judge humanity by concordat standards. But humanity didn't fit neatly into those standards. They were younger, brasher, more willing to take risks. They bent rules and found loopholes. They improvised when proper solutions weren't available. And most importantly, they refused to give up. When told they couldn't build warships, they built cargo haulers that could become warships. When told to wait for proper military response, they fought anyway with what they had. When told their place was at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy, they proved their worth in combat. The next 6 months would determine humanity's future in the Concordat. Would they be recognized as full partners, trusted with the same military capabilities as other species, or would they remain subordinate, always dependent on others for protection? Sarah didn't know the answer yet, but she knew one thing for certain. Humanity wouldn't go quietly back to the restrictions. They had tasted independence, proven their capability, and earned respect through blood and sacrifice. The Concordat could accept that reality and adapt, or they could cling to old fears and outdated treaties. Either way, humanity would survive. They always did, because they were the species that refused to accept impossible, the species that turned cargo haulers into warships, the species that held the line when no one else could. They were human, and that meant something. The Phoenix wasn't just rising anymore. It was flying, and the galaxy would have to make room for it, whether they wanted to or not. 5 months after the tribunal, Commander Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of Luna shipyards watching something that shouldn't exist take shape. The vessel was massive, dwarfing the converted cargo haulers and mining ships that had fought at New Perth. Its hull was proper military armor, not improvised plating. Its weapons were purpose-built naval cannons, not mining lasers with modified focusing arrays. Its shields were military-grade, designed from the ground up for combat. The UHSV Indomitable was humanity's first openly constructed warship in 23 years. And it was beautiful. Dr. Marcus Webb stood beside her, his datapad showing construction progress. We're 3 weeks ahead of schedule. The commission observers have been impressed with our efficiency. Turns out all those years building civilian vessels taught us a lot about rapid construction techniques. Sarah smiled at that. The commission established by the High Arbiter had been watching human shipyards constantly, documenting every aspect of the construction process. They wanted to ensure that humanity was building defensive vessels, not weapons of aggression. So far, the inspections had gone well. Better than well, actually. Several commission members had privately expressed admiration for human engineering approaches. Any word on the final vote? Sarah asked. Webb's expression grew serious. Tomorrow, the commission will present their findings to the full Concordat Assembly. Admiral Okoye thinks we have the votes, but it'll be close. Close. After everything they had done, all the battles fought and lives lost, humanity's future still hung on a narrow political margin. Sarah understood the reality. The Concordat had existed for thousands of years, governed by species who had established the rules long before humans even discovered fire. Changing those rules, accepting a young and aggressive species as military equals, went against every conservative instinct. But circumstances had changed. The 5 months since New Perth had proven that. The Carrix had returned, probing different sectors of Concordat space. Each time, the nearest forces responded, and increasingly those forces included human vessels. The Phoenix Initiative ships, now operating openly rather than in secret, had engaged the hive swarms in 17 separate encounters. They had won 12 of those fights outright, forced stalemates in 4 others, and lost only 1 engagement. The one loss had been costly. The converted cargo hauler New Dawn had been caught by a Carrix ambush while protecting a mining convoy. The ship had fought for 2 hours before its improvised systems failed. 63 people died when the New Dawn's reactor breached. But they bought enough time for the convoy to escape, saving over 400 civilians from multiple species. The Concordat couldn't ignore those results. Human vessels were proving their value in real combat, not just in theoretical debates. They filled gaps in the defensive network, responded quickly to emerging threats, and fought with a determination that impressed even the most skeptical observers. Commander Chen, "You have a visitor," Lieutenant Ramos called from the communication station. Inspector Velcheron is requesting to come aboard. Sarah raised her eyebrows. Velcheron had testified on humanity's behalf at the tribunal, but their relationship was still complicated. Years of adversarial interactions didn't disappear overnight. Send him to the observation deck. Velcheron arrived 10 minutes later, his four-armed form moving with the grace typical of the Thalzir species. He stood beside Sarah and Webb, studying the Indomitable through the transparent hull. "She is impressive," Velcheron said quietly. "Far more sophisticated than your converted civilian vessels. You have learned quickly." "We had good teachers," Sarah replied. "Concordate engineering manuals are quite detailed, and we had decades of experience building ships that looked civilian, but could be something more. Turns out that knowledge transfers well to purpose-built military construction." Velcheron made a gesture that might have been amusement. "Indeed, I have reviewed your construction logs. The efficiency is remarkable. At your current pace, you could build a fleet of 20 vessels like this within 2 years. Is that a problem, Inspector?" "That depends on tomorrow's vote," Velcheron said. "I came here to tell you something in confidence. The Commission is split almost evenly. 34 species support lifting the restrictions. 31 oppose. The remaining 12 are undecided. It will come down to those 12 votes." Sarah felt tension knot in her stomach. "What can we do to convince them?" "Nothing," Velcheron replied. "You have already done everything possible. You fought well. You proved your capabilities. You showed discipline and restraint. Now the decision rests with politicians who must balance practical reality against ancient fears. So we just wait?" Velcheron turned to face her directly. "I have spent my career enforcing the treaties that keep the Concordate stable. I believed deeply in those rules. I thought humanity was dangerous, too aggressive, too unpredictable. And I was not entirely wrong. Humans are all those things." He paused, his dark eyes studying her. "But I have learned that being dangerous is not the same as being evil. That aggression can be channeled toward protection rather than conquest. That unpredictability can be an asset rather than a flaw. The humans who fought at New Perth were dangerous, aggressive, and unpredictable. They were also brave, selfless, and honorable. These qualities can coexist. Thank you, Inspector. That means a great deal coming from you." "I am no longer an inspector," Velcheron said. "I have accepted a new position as liaison officer between Concordate Command and human military forces. If tomorrow's vote goes as I hope, I will be working with you to integrate human vessels into the larger defensive network." Sarah stared at him in surprise. "You're joining us?" "I am joining the effort to make the Concordate stronger," Velcheron corrected. "Human ships are proving valuable, but you still have much to learn about coordinated operations with other species. I can help bridge that gap. If you will have me." Dr. Webb extended his hand in the human custom. "We would be honored, Liaison Officer Velcheron." The former inspector looked at the offered hand for a moment, then grasped it with one of his 4 hands. It was a small gesture, but it represented something larger. A bridge being built between species who had been adversaries. A recognition that cooperation was possible even after years of conflict. The next morning, Sarah found herself back on Concordate Prime, sitting in the observation gallery of the assembly chamber. The room was even larger than the tribunal chamber, designed to hold representatives from all 47 member species plus numerous observers and staff. Admiral Okoye sat beside her, dressed in a formal uniform that bore rank insignia not worn in public for 23 years. She had been officially reinstated as a flag officer, pending the Commission's vote. If the vote failed, she would return to civilian status. If it succeeded, she would become the first commander of humanity's legitimate military fleet in over 2 decades. The High Arbiter called the session to order. Her crystalline form reflected the lights of the chamber, creating a dazzling display. This assembly convenes to hear the final report of the Commission, reviewing military restrictions on humanity. Commissioner Tarvish will present the findings. Commissioner Tarvish was a member of an aquatic species, his form contained in a mobile water tank. His translated voice echoed through the chamber. Distinguished representatives, the Commission has spent 5 months evaluating humanity's military capabilities, intentions, and integration into concordant defensive operations. We have observed their shipyards, analyzed their combat performance, and interviewed their commanders and crews. He activated holographic displays showing various data points. Our findings are complex. Humanity has demonstrated military competence exceeding initial estimates. Their vessels, even the improvised conversions, have proven effective against Karik's forces. Their crews show discipline and tactical flexibility. Their commanders make sound strategic decisions. The displays shifted to show casualty reports. However, humans also accept casualty rates that many concordate species find disturbing. They take risks that seem reckless. They improvise solutions that violate standard doctrine. They are, in a word, unpredictable. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Sarah couldn't tell if the reaction was positive or negative. Commissioner Tarvesh continued. The question before this assembly is not whether humans can build effective warships. They clearly can. The question is whether allowing them to do so serves the Concordate's interests or threatens them. He paused, letting the tension build. The commission vote was divided. After extensive debate, we reached a narrow consensus. We recommend that the Treaty of Titan be revised to allow humanity full military partnership, subject to the following conditions. Sarah leaned forward, listening intently as Tarvesh outlined the proposed terms. Human vessels would be integrated into the Concordate defensive network. They would operate under joint command structures during major operations. They would participate in the Concordate military academy programs. They would share technology and tactical data with other member species. In exchange, humanity would gain the right to build and maintain a military fleet without the previous restrictions. They could construct warships, develop weapon systems, and deploy forces to protect human colonies and Concordate space as needed. These terms represent a significant shift in Concordate policy. Tarvesh concluded. We are proposing to treat humanity as equals rather than subordinates. This decision comes with risks, but the Commission believes those risks are outweighed by the benefits of having human forces as partners, rather than potentially desperate rebels. The High Arbiter spoke. The Commission's recommendation has been heard. Now the Assembly must vote. All those in favor of revising the Treaty of Titan according to the proposed terms, indicate your support. The vote was conducted electronically, with each species representative entering their decision privately. The results were tallied instantly but not displayed until all votes were recorded. Sarah watched the progress bar creep upward, her heart pounding. 34 votes registered, then 35. The bar climbed slowly, 40, 42. Each number felt like an eternity. Finally, the count reached 47. All species had voted. The High Arbiter reviewed the results, her crystalline form pulsing with light. The vote is recorded, she announced. 36 species vote in favor of revising the treaty. 11 species vote against. The proposal is adopted. Sarah exhaled breath she didn't know she was holding. 36 votes. They had exceeded the simple majority needed. It wasn't overwhelming support, but it was enough. The chamber erupted in discussion, representatives talking among themselves. Some seemed pleased, others clearly unhappy, but the decision was made. Humanity had won their political battle. Admiral Okoye stood, her face carefully neutral. Come on, Commander. We have work to do. They left the assembly chamber and made their way outside. The streets of Concordate Prime were busy with beings from dozens of species going about their daily business. Sarah wondered how many of them knew what had just happened, how many understood that the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted, even if only slightly. A shuttle was waiting to take them back to Luna shipyards. During the flight, Okoye finally allowed herself to smile. We did it, Sarah. Against all odds, we actually did it. We're not done yet, Sarah cautioned. 11 species voted against us. That's nearly a quarter of the Concordate. We'll face opposition, probably for years. Let them oppose, Okoye said. We've proven we belong here. Now we just have to keep proving it every day with every action. Show them that human warships make the Concordate stronger, not weaker. The shuttle docked at Luna shipyards. Sarah and Okoye made their way back to the observation deck overlooking the Indomitable. The ship's construction was nearly complete. In another week, it would launch for its maiden voyage. Dr. Webb was still there studying his datapad. He looked up as they entered. I heard the news. Congratulations, Admiral. He emphasized Okoye's rank with a grin. Thank you, Doctor. Your engineering made this possible. Engineering was the easy part, Webb replied. Politics was the hard part. And that victory belongs to people like Commander Chen who fought the battles that proved we deserved this chance. Sarah looked at the Indomitable, then at the dozens of other vessels under construction throughout the shipyard. Destroyers, frigates, carriers, support vessels. A proper military fleet taking shape. Not converted civilians, not improvised weapons, but Purpose-built warships designed and constructed openly. What's our first mission? She asked Okoye. Joint patrol with a Vexillar battle group along the Rim territories. The Kariks are still active out there. Concordat Command wants to see how we work with established forces. It'll be a test. Everything is a test now, Sarah observed. We'll be under constant scrutiny. Every mistake will be magnified. Every success will be questioned. Good, Okoye replied. That means they're taking us seriously. 23 years ago, they dismissed us as primitives playing with technology they didn't understand. Now they see us as potential equals, which means they're watching to see if we deserve that status. I'll take serious scrutiny over dismissive contempt any day. Webb brought up a holographic display showing fleet deployment plans. We have 47 Phoenix Initiative vessels currently operational. The Indomitable will be ready next week. 7 more purpose-built warships are under construction, scheduled for completion within 6 months, and we have 300 additional civilian vessels that can still convert to military configuration if needed. Are we keeping the conversion capability? Sarah asked. Yes, Okoye confirmed. The revised treaty allows it. Having a fleet that can expand rapidly in emergencies is actually seen as an asset now. Other species are studying our modular design approaches, considering whether they want to adopt similar systems. Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction at that. Human engineering, once seen as crude improvisation, was now being studied and potentially copied. The species that had been told they couldn't build warships was now teaching others how to build better ships. The next week passed quickly. The Indomitable completed final systems checks and was cleared for launch. Sarah had been given command, a promotion from cargo hauler captain to warship commander. Her old crew from the Meridian had volunteered to transfer with her, forming the core of the new ship's complement. Launch day arrived with clear skies over Luna. The shipyard workers had decorated the Indomitable with human flags alongside Concordat emblems, a visual representation of the new partnership. Representatives from multiple species attended the ceremony, including Velsharan and several commission members. Sarah stood on the bridge, her hand on the command console. The crew was at their stations, professional and ready. This wasn't a converted cargo hauler with improvised systems. This was a real warship, built to human specifications with the full backing of Concordat law. All systems green, Commander, Ramos reported from his station. Ship is ready for departure. Sarah activated the ship-wide communication system. Attention all hands. This is the commander. Today we launch humanity's first legitimate warship in 23 years. Some of you fought at New Perth and converted civilian vessels. Others are new to military service. But all of you are here because you understand what this ship represents. She paused, choosing her words carefully. The Indomitable is more than steel and weapons and engines. It's a symbol of humanity's place in the galaxy. A promise that we will defend our people and our allies. A declaration that we refuse to be helpless or dependent. And most importantly, it's proof that impossible is just another word for difficult. The crew listened in silence, understanding the weight of the moment. They said we couldn't build warships, Sarah continued. They wrote it into law, enforced it with inspections, and promised to protect us so we wouldn't need to protect ourselves. But at New Perth we learned that promises aren't enough. So we found loopholes. We improvised. We converted civilian vessels into combat craft and fought anyway. We proved that human ingenuity could overcome any restriction. Her voice grew stronger. Now the restrictions are lifted. We can build openly. We can fight alongside other Concordat forces as equals. But with that recognition comes responsibility. Every action we take, every battle we fight, every decision we make will be watched and judged. We have to prove every single day that we deserve this trust. Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. I know we're ready for that challenge. Because humans don't quit. We don't accept defeat. And we definitely don't let anyone tell us what we can't do. So let's show the galaxy what humanity can accomplish when we're given a fair chance. All stations prepare for launch. The Indomitable's engines came online, their power thrumming through the deck plates. The ship lifted from its construction cradle, breaking free of Luna's gravity. On the observation screen, Sarah could see the Earth turning below, blue and beautiful and alive. 23 years ago, she had watched from orbit as Earth's fleet burned. Today, she was commanding a new fleet's first vessel. The cycle was complete. The Phoenix had risen. Set course for the Rim territories, Sarah ordered. Standard cruising speed. Let's go meet our new Vexillar partners and show them how humans fight. The Indomitable accelerated away from Luna, its wake visible to observers on the ground. It passed other vessels in orbit, both human and alien. Some transmitted greetings and congratulations. Others remained silent, their crews perhaps still uncertain about humanity's new status. Sarah didn't blame them for the uncertainty. Trust had to be earned, and humanity had a long way to go before they were fully accepted. But they had taken the first crucial step. They had proven their worth in combat. They had navigated the political process. They had shown that they could follow rules while still protecting their interests. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity was no longer a restricted species, forbidden from building proper defenses. They were partners in the Concordate's mission, equal contributors to galactic security. It had taken 23 years of patient work, years of following unjust restrictions and swallowing pride, years of secret preparation and careful planning, years of fighting with converted civilian vessels and improvised weapons. But in the end, humanity had achieved what many thought impossible. They had gone from defeated subordinates to respected partners. They had transformed restriction into opportunity. They had proven that determination and ingenuity could overcome any obstacle. The Indomitable reached the jump point and prepared to enter faster than light travel. Sarah looked at the view screen one last time, seeing the solar system that had birthed humanity spreading out behind them. They had come so far. From a single planet to a spacefaring civilization, from ignorant primitives to galactic partners, from forbidden to build warships to leading the construction of a new fleet. And this was just the beginning. Humanity had proven they could survive. Now they would prove they could thrive. They would build more ships, train more crews, defend more worlds. They would take their place as equals in the galactic community. But they would never forget the lessons learned during those years of restriction, the importance of preparation, the value of ingenuity, the strength that comes from refusing to accept defeat. Jump in 3, 2, 1, the navigation officer counted down. The Indomitable leaped into faster-than-light travel, leaving a brilliant flash of light as it departed the solar system. Heading toward new challenges, new battles, new opportunities to prove humanity's worth. They had said it couldn't be done. They had forbidden it, restricted it, and promised it would never happen. They were wrong. Humanity had built their warships. They had earned their place. They had proven that no law, no treaty, no restriction could stop a species determined to survive and protect their own. The Phoenix wasn't just risen. It was soaring, and the galaxy would have to make room for it, because humanity was done asking permission. They were done being told what they couldn't do. They were done accepting subordination. They were equals now, partners, warriors, builders, survivors. They were human, and that meant anything was possible.